My name is Avery Kincaid, 30 years old. Night smells like bleach at the hospital and like warm metal on my street. At 6:03 a.m., sodium lights make every face a tired shade of mustard, and if you listen, you can hear the block inhale before alarms go off and everyone remembers who they're supposed to be. I come home with a pocket full of other people's heartbeats and one small, ridiculous wish, a spot close enough that my knees don't argue the stairs. That wish belonged to Galen Stroud first. He believed a public curb could be privately conquered if your cars were shiny enough and your sunglasses expensive at dawn. He kept three: some low black German shark, a white SUV with the moral weight of a tank, and an aging muscle relic he spoke to like a fragile uncle. Every morning, he performed the same ballet: 6 inches forward, four back, a little angle, a little smirk, leaving gaps too narrow for anything with doors but wide enough to fit an insult. We met the way they teach us to meet belligerent families after a code: name, context, need. Hi, I'm Avery. I work nights at Harborview, I said, voice soft from 12 hours of being necessary. When I get home at 3 or 6, there's nowhere to park. Could you? He lifted his glasses with 2 fingers as if unveiling a masterpiece. No, he said, and let the word drop like a coin into a well he expected me to never climb out of. Then, sermon voice: first come, first served. For 6 months, I parked 3 blocks away and walked home under that mustard light, counting cracks in the sidewalk like rosary beads. I watched Arthur and May Delaney move together, his hand under her elbow, hers, on a bag of oranges too heavy for one breath. I watched Lena Park angle twins and groceries with one forearm, keys in her teeth like a dare. We learned to carry our exhaustion like carry-ons, pretending it all zipped. The first omen arrived feathered. A crow landed on Galen's black hood and looked at me the way nurses look at a monitor before the numbers decide to be honest. Then another, then 3. They shuffled like gamblers, then signed their names in chalky loops on his glossy paint. Galen came out with a broom and the belief that anger works on physics. The birds just stepped up, hood to mirror to sign, critics with wings. I tried the smallest kindness: unsalted peanuts on my balcony rail, a palm open like a truce. 1 crow became 3, then a dozen. Roomers with beaks. They learned my offbeat drum. 6:15 home, 6:25 shower, 6:40 pretend to sleep. They watched me the way the night shift watches a blinking ventilator, attentive, curious, betting on patterns. Are you training them? Miles Corbett asked one morning, hair bent into an algorithm by his pillow. He's a software engineer, which means he trusts systems until humans touch them. I'm cooperating, I said, cracking a shell. Difference matters. He kissed my temple. Let's not escalate a parking thing into... Into what? My voice came out too quick. Because bones, after too many nights, become drawers after a move. Nothing where it belongs. He didn't answer. His phone, face down, lit with a name I already knew. Sloan Vega, his ex, and a winking notification preview, like a cat at a bird bath. Miles flipped the phone over, guilty in that tiny human way that doesn't always mean the worst thing, but rarely means nothing. I pretended the kettle boiled louder than my thoughts. Outside, Galen installed a perimeter of indignities, sprinklers that hissed silver arcs across the sidewalk, a gadget that whined at a frequency designed by someone who hates dogs, reflective tape like cheap festival bunting. The crows mocked him the way teenagers mock new rules. They learned the sprinkler sensors in an afternoon, turned the whine into background music, and wore the tape like tinsel. I moved the feeding to the elm above his favorite spot, whistled 2 notes, broke a shell. Black commas dotted the branches. Galen stepped out and saw them and me, and, for one sacred second, his face did math it couldn't solve. This is the place where wiser people stop. This is where stories tell you I bought a garage pass and downloaded a meditation app. Instead, I did what cornered humans do, made meaning out of small control. Because it wasn't about parking anymore. It was about being told the world belonged to people who arrived late and still wanted the best seat. I escalated with restraint that only looks like restraint from far away, bread kissed with fish oil, schedule-consistent treats. Gulls showed up, then pigeons, then a ridiculously solemn turkey that got the date wrong. Galen's cars became canvases. The black one went abstract, the white SUV learned humility, and the muscle car wore a grief he couldn't pressure wash. The first note appeared when our building camera went blind beneath a black spray. I know it's you. Stop, or I'll make you stop. I taped it to the fridge next to a child's crayon drawing of a dragon a grateful family gave me. Miles touched the paper with 2 fingers. Avery, he said, like he was buckling me into a seatbelt. This is getting dangerous. Yes, I said, and some clear, cold part of me thought, good. Clarity is a light that sometimes burns. I called my cousin at the rehab center and asked a question that stuck in my teeth even as it left my mouth. How do you feel about corvids? Professionally delighted, he said. Personally cautious. Can I borrow a few educators for demonstrations? They came in like black sculptures that had learned to choose wind. Imprinted ravens with eyes like mirrors, and a presence you don't share a room with so much as enter as a guest. I looped Galen's car alarm in the early dark and let the ravens listen until they held still, holy as a pause. At 2:00 a.m., the night opened its throat and sang. 17 dark shapes took turns mimicking that alarm, with a precision that made my skin purl. It came back every 15 minutes like a conscience. By day 3, Galen held himself like sleep had become a rumor. Police came, took statements, left with a shrug. We can't sight birds, one officer said to the ravens as if they might take notes. The for sale sign sprouted in his lawn the next morning. The street exhaled. Dogs dozed. May watered her roses without glancing at mirrors. I slept, really slept, the kind of sleep that lands like a paramedic. It lasted 48 hours. Engines arrived like bass. Windows black. Cole Stroud, Galen's brother, didn't park. He deployed. 6 cars tessellated into 14 spaces with the kind of geometry that makes you superstitious about numbers. Men moved like a choreography about intention. Damon Pike in the Bentley, jaw somewhere between granite and regret. Trevor Lux in the Tesla, fingers itching. 2 cousins whose faces were perfect for letting other people speak. They studied the block like a map they planned to redraw in their surname. Under my doormat, an envelope smelled faintly of cologne and threat. We know what you did to Galen. Try your bird tricks with us. See what happens. The Strouds. Miles said my name once, soft as gauze. I didn't turn. The crows lined the power lines like an audience that had already bought tickets. Above, a juvenile, feathers still brown-dusted, landed on the street sign and held my gaze the way a question holds an answer. I flicked a peanut. He hopped closer, bold like curiosity in a lab coat. Hey, little guy, I whispered. Welcome to the neighborhood. All wars start quietly for someone. Mine began with a bird and a promise I didn't know I was making. The convoy's first week felt like a dare disguised as a schedule. Engines idled before dawn, headlights spreading long, white blades across bedroom ceilings. Cole Stroud stood with a travel mug and that particular posture men buy with their first serious watch. Hips loose, chin set, like the street was a boardroom and we were the quarterly losses. Damon Pike took the curb by the hydrant at exactly 7:03. Trevor Lux slid beside the taped-off drain, and the cousins tucked their SUVs into spaces shaped like insults. 14 spots swallowed by 6 cars. Geometry as a weapon. I started keeping a notebook in my scrub pocket. Times, weather, how many steps Cole took between sips. It made Miles nervous when he saw it on the counter, damp from rain and the steam of noodles we ate standing up. This is obsession, he said gently. This is pattern, I said. Pattern is how we make the world behave. He looked like he wanted to say Sloane's name and didn't. The mercy of silence can be so loud. The first brick came through my windshield at 2:11 a.m., arriving with that crystalline scream glass, sings when it stops pretending to be solid. I was halfway down the stairwell before my body remembered it was in socks. The brick sat neatly on the driver's seat, wrapped in white paper like a bad present. The message underneath was pencil hard, strokes cut by someone who liked how pressure felt. Last warning. I stood in the wet night while the crows arranged themselves on the power line like a line of musical notes. No sirens, no witnesses, only a neighborhood of curtains that had learned not to move. My hands shook a little, but not from fear. Adrenaline feels like clarity until you act on it. By noon, the building's new camera blinked to black under a fresh veil of spray paint. The officer who took the report was kind in that bureaucratic way that still knows your name. He asked about enemies. I let a breath out like a tire losing air. Not enemies, I said. Habits and expensive shoes. My cousin called while I swept glass from the seat with a hospital towel. Wildlife Services got complaints, he said, voice tight, about the educator ravens. Aggressive harassment, weaponized birds. I have to recall them, Aves. Today. They're not aggressive, I said, jaw finding the back of my teeth. They're accurate. Doesn't matter. Optics ate science for breakfast. He paused. I'm sorry. I watched the imprinted ravens ride away in the transport crates like royalty sentenced to a sabbatical. The street felt thinner without their gravity. The wild crows stayed, heads cocked, bodies making a black punctuation mark against the sky. You still have us, the silence said. I started small, because small survives. I set a red bottle cap at the mouth of Damon's favorite space and a yellow felt tip. Near the curb, Trevor flirted with every morning and tied a blue ribbon to the sign 2 car lengths behind where Cole preferred to square off. Nothing near the cars themselves. That would be bait. 3 blocks away, at a cracked patch of asphalt behind the plumbing supply store, I laid out peanuts on a pallet and whistled 2 notes, always the same. Red, yellow, blue, then food. Consistency is a language. The first day, 3 crows came. The second, 8. By the 4th, they arrived before me, landing on the pallet like they had a time card to punch. I didn't point at the cars. I didn't gesture or instruct. I just held the sequence. Red cap on the right, yellow pen center, blue ribbon left, then the nuts, then the whistle. Breakfast that followed a story that wrote itself into their bodies. If you've ever shown a patient how to breathe through pain, you know this rhythm, the demonstration, the mimic, the relief. Miles watched one morning, coffee steaming in the chill, eyes narrowing the way they do when a program finally compiles. You're not telling them what to do, he said. No, I'm telling them when to want, I said, surprising us both with the truth of it. By the end of the week, the murder was keeping time with an accuracy my wristwatch envied. When Damon nosed his Bentley too fast into the hydrant spot, they pulsed above him on the wire, bodies quivering with restrained electricity. When Trevor idled too long across May Delaney's driveway, the flock tracked him with that synchronized tilt, an index of disapproval. The incident happened on a Monday that smelled like wet cardboard. May had bags in the trunk and pride in her spine. She doesn't ask for help because her bones still remember being young. An apple bag slipped, fruit bowed to gravity, rolling toward Damon's immaculate tire. Crows see apples as a good idea across all languages. 3 dropped like commas to investigate. Damon swore and swung his briefcase in a wide, stupid arc. The sound of it hitting the juvenile's wing was dull and wrong, the kind of sound you feel in your teeth. The world hushed. The other birds froze, bodies arranged like the moment before a verdict. The juvenile, my bold kid from the street sign, tried to move and couldn't. I was moving before I knew it. Towel from my bag, because nurses carry towels like mothers carry names. Shh, I said, which helps only the speaker, and wrapped him soft. His heart vibrated like a phone on a table. I drove to my cousin's rehab center with my own ribcage doing drumline. Clean fracture, my cousin said, hands the kind of gentle that comes from a decade of repetition. Splint, rest, 6 to 8 weeks if he listens. He's not a listener, I said, tears hot, because rage burns everything on its way out. His name is Fletcher. The name arrived like a commitment. I signed the intake. Outside, crows traced the roofline, not loud, just there, black apostrophes, in a sentence I was still learning to read. By lunch, the video was online. Some neighbor I'd never met filmed Damon leaving the curb while a smear of black feathers was bundled in my towel and the sky filled with observation. No dive bombing, no theatrics, just 40 pairs of eyes following him. The clip's caption did the rest. Hurt one, be seen by all. It leapt through feeds the way a rumor becomes a religion. Comments multiplied like something alive. Someone added a beat under the footage and called it Crow Court. Memes declared Damon public enemy seeds. I didn't share it. I didn't have to. The street transcribed its own story now. The next morning, the murder shadowed Damon like a second idea he couldn't shake. At the gym, they lined the roofline. At lunch, the patio awning. At a red light, the next cross street signal. Not attacking. Just attending. When cameras found him, he tried to laugh. The birds cocked their heads in unison on the B-roll, an accidental choreography that made him look like a man in a courtroom where the jury was older than law. Cole went on offense the way men do when nuance makes them itch. He installed sprinklers that misted the air with threat, ultrasonic boxes that whined, plastic owls that looked like cheap sculpture. The crows turned the sprinklers into games, used the boxes as perches, and treated the owls like lawn chairs. People filmed that too. The day after, I found sugar hissing into the bottom of my gas tank, 2 tires opening their mouths to the nails someone fed them. Whoever it was didn't leave a note because the car was won. I filed the report, answered the officer's polite questions, and walked home with my hands empty and my head full. Miles held the door. "Enough," he said softly. "Please." I looked at him and saw the gentleness that had gotten me through the winter layered under a fear of losing me to something I couldn't put down. "I'm not aiming anymore," I said. "I'm answering." That evening, the crows set their own schedule. At 5 on the dot, mailboxes clicked open and flags lifted in a line so precise it looked rehearsed. A ring of garden gnomes migrated from Mrs. Kowalski's yard into a spiral that matched the pattern I'd laid on the pallet that morning. Red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue. The flock didn't need me to point. They were writing. Neighbors started coming out, not to fight, but to witness. Arthur Delaney leaned on his cane and nodded at me once, a small, solemn knighting. "They remember," he said. "They do," I said. At 7:12, a man I didn't know taped a paper to the church bulletin board at the corner. HOA emergency meeting, Tuesday 6 p.m. The words stacked like a diagnosis. At 7:13, an envelope slid under my door, heavy paper, expensive ink. "You've made your point. We'll talk. Church basement. Bring your birds if you can make them speak. See." I held the paper and felt something shift in the room, the way you feel a patient's vitals turn before the monitor admits it. Outside, the wire hummed with bodies. The street waited like a held breath. And somewhere distant, Fletcher tapped his splint against the crate wall, alive, as if knocking out a pattern only I could hear. Tomorrow, the neighborhood would put on its nicest anger and sit in folding chairs. Tomorrow, we'd decide what kind of story we were in, nuisance, war, or treaty. I slid the envelope into my notebook and circled 6 o'clock p.m. in red ink that looked like resolve. Then I opened the window and whistled 2 notes into the bluing evening. The church basement smelled like old coffee and linoleum that had been scrubbed too often to ever feel clean again. Folding chairs lined up in rows like penitents. On one side, neighbors hunched in their winter coats, Arthur and May Delaney, Mrs. Kowalski clutching her notebook like a shield, and a few faces I only knew from curtains twitching. On the other, Cole Stroud and his convoy, crisp suits and a kind of silence that bills itself as power. Between us stood Paula Whitfield, the HOA president, gavel in hand, an expression that said she'd rather be refereeing kindergarten. I took a seat near the middle, hospital badge still clipped to my scrub top because exhaustion makes you honest. The crows outside lined the church roof, visible through the basement window slits, a restless punctuation against the gray. Paula cleared her throat. "We're here to discuss ongoing disturbances, property damage, and avian involvement." She said avian like it might hatch into something. Her eyes moved between Cole and me, uncertain which one of us was the problem and which was the storm. Cole stood first, of course. "My family's vehicles and home have been targeted by a resident, Ms. Kincaid, who's, what, weaponized wildlife? This isn't folklore, it's vandalism by proxy." I didn't move. I'd spent too many nights being yelled at by grief in human form to flinch at men with volume. He gestured toward the window. "She trains them. She feeds them to attack." "I feed them," I said quietly, cutting across him like a scalpel. "They act according to memory, not orders." "Same difference," he snapped. "No," I said. "That's the difference between cruelty and consequence." The room shifted. Even Paula's gavel hand paused. Arthur raised his hand from the front row, paper-thin skin, veined like old maps. "My wife dropped her groceries," he said, voice shaky but aim true. "The birds cleaned the apples, not her blood. That's what I saw." A murmur rippled, a fragile alignment of stories. Mrs. Kowalski added, "They only ever go where they're called." Someone else muttered about Damon's swing and the feathers that followed. Cole's jaw tightened. Paula shuffled her notes like they might form a shield. Animal control confirmed a protected juvenile crow was treated and released, she said. They also confirmed there are no legal measures to, quote, remove or discipline the species in question. So our authority is limited. Cole's laugh was small and sharp. You're telling me we just live with it? Looks that way, I said. Welcome to ecology. Paula's gavel hit wood, more ritual than verdict. Meeting adjourned. I suggest everyone, humans included, practice de-escalation. People stood, metal legs screeching. No resolution, but something had changed. Like the air after a thunderclap, when you know the pressure's broken even if the rain hasn't fallen yet. Cole stared at me as the room emptied, his eyes cold but uncertain, like a chess player realizing the board's bigger than he thought. Outside, dusk was low and bruised. The crows followed us out, not swooping, just watching. Cole's convoy rolled off with military precision. The noise faded until it was only wind through gutters. That night I found sugar in my gas tank, thick crystals melting to ruin, 2 tires gutted, paint stripped from my hood in ragged streaks that caught the porch light like wounds. No note this time. The car itself was the sentence. I reported it because paper makes people pretend to listen, and went upstairs. Miles waited at the kitchen table, laptop open but forgotten. Is this how it ends? He asked. It's how they think it ends, I said. You could let it, just stop. I looked at him, at the man who measures life in inputs and outputs, who still thinks peace is the absence of noise. Peace isn't quiet, I said. It's when the noise belongs to everyone. He exhaled, long and tired. You sound like them. Maybe they sound like me. I slept in patches that night, dreams fluttering with black wings. By morning, the air outside was wrong, heavy, sweet, foul. When I opened the window, I gagged. Every car in the Stroud convoy gleamed under a lacquer of something fermented and unspeakable, the color of old secrets. The smell crawled into the lungs of the entire block. Cole burst from his doorway in gloves and a painter's mask, dragging a pressure washer that whined like fury. He sprayed until the smell became air again, but it didn't help. By then, every neighbor had come outside, half in disgust, half in delight. A detailing truck arrived, took one look, and left. Within hours, hazmat quotes were circulating like gossip. By noon, the Stroud fleet was gone, fled to a private garage miles away. The street exhaled, cautious. I was still on the balcony when I saw the envelope. Plain white, tucked under my door with military neatness. You've made your point. We'll find somewhere else to park. Call off your birds. See. No apology, no threat. Just surrender disguised as civility. I taped it beside the first note on my fridge. Bookends to a chapter that hadn't yet decided if it was over. For 3 days, quiet pretended to be peace. The block smelled of roses again. May pruned hers without flinching. Arthur walked slower, hand brushing her elbow like punctuation. I almost believed it could stay that way. Then the flock, restless without enemies, started to create. Mrs. Kowalski's gnomes vanished overnight, reappearing in a perfect spiral on her front lawn, an echo of the pattern at the warehouse where I fed them. Mailbox flags lifted at 5:00 p.m., sharp, in a synchronized salute. Someone's wedding arch gained a crown of spoons. A toddler's toy truck parked itself on top of the church steps, balanced impossibly. The crows were inventing new work because the old war was gone. When I called my cousin to tell him, he laughed softly. Idle minds with wings, he said. You gave them structure, reward, hierarchy, and then took it away. So what do I do? Ground them? Give them a job, he said, or they'll invent worse ones. He wasn't wrong. The next morning, I found Fletcher on my railing, splint gone, feathers glossy and healed. He cawed twice. My own whistle mirrored back at me. Then pecked the balcony rail as if to say, your move. I watched him, this creature who'd learned my timing and outgrown my training. The sky behind him was pale and full of possibilities. All right, I said, let's get you employed. That's how it began. The shift from war to work, from revenge to purpose. I didn't know it yet, but that single sentence, half joke, half prayer, would turn our strange little street into something the world would one day name the Corvid collaboration. But first, I needed to build them puzzles. The hardware store clerk didn't even blink when I told him I needed a dozen transparent boxes, a roll of nylon rope, and a pound of unsalted peanuts. Seattle's the kind of city where people assume you're building either an art installation or a protest. I supposed this was a little of both. By noon, my apartment looked like a cross between a science fair and a nursery for geniuses who'd learned to fly. Miles stood in the doorway, watching me sketch lever diagrams on a pizza box. "You realize," he said, "this is the part in every movie where the audience starts worrying about the protagonist's grip on reality." "I'm fine," I muttered, tying a rope loop. "I am designing enrichment." He raised an eyebrow. "For birds." "For students," I corrected. "They're learning faster than we are." He sighed, a sound halfway between affection and alarm, and went to make coffee. I could hear the click of his phone unlocking, Sloane's name, no doubt, appearing like a ghost in his feed again. I ignored it. Focus was survival. The first puzzle feeder was crude, a plexiglass box with a sliding door that lifted when a string was pulled. Inside, a single peanut gleamed like currency. I mounted it on the balcony railing, sat cross-legged on the floor, and waited. Within 15 minutes, Fletcher landed, black feathers trimmed in faint brown, eyes bright with mischief. He tilted his head, examined the box, then looked at me as if to confirm this was a test worth taking. He pecked the string once, twice, nothing. The third time he yanked harder. The lid slid open and the peanut rolled free. He blinked, astonished at his own success, then grabbed it and flew to the elm. I laughed. Loud, messy, real. The sound startled me. "Did he do it?" Miles called from the kitchen. "He solved it," I said. We repeated the ritual daily. Each puzzle got harder. A twist latch, a stick lever, a lid held by a counterweight. Fletcher solved them all, sometimes alone, sometimes with others hovering nearby, observing. It was less like training and more like a seminar. One afternoon, a woman with a camera appeared at the base of the stairs. Short hair, denim jacket, energy like curiosity given caffeine. "You're the nurse with the birds, right? I'm Tessa Monroe, freelance documentarian. I shot that viral Crow Court clip." I nodded warily. She smiled. "People loved it. I'd like to film a follow-up, this experiment, whatever it is. You could show the world what's actually happening instead of letting Twitter do it for you." I almost said no. Then I looked at Fletcher, balancing on the feeder, considering a latch like a philosopher faced with a locked door, and realized this was bigger than me. "Fine," I said, "but no dramatics. Science, not sorcery." "Deal," she said, grinning. Within a week, Tessa had permits, a cameraman, and a sound guy who whispered "holy shit" every time Fletcher pulled a new trick. The footage was mesmerizing. Glossy black heads tilting, claws steady, wings half furled for balance as they manipulated levers like surgeons with feathers. The internet called me the Crow Whisperer. The local paper called me the Feathered Engineer. UW's Dr. Ria Chandra, an animal cognition researcher, emailed, "We'd like to collaborate. Are your subjects open to study?" I printed the email and pinned it next to my fridge notes, right between the threats and the truce. For a few weeks, it felt like peace had found a hobby. The crows had structure again, and the neighbors had a reason to smile instead of glare. Even Cole Stroud's name faded from conversations. He'd vanished into the kind of silence only money can buy. Then, one morning, I came out to find the puzzle box open, but I hadn't touched it. The string lay slack, the latch unbroken, the peanut gone. Fletcher was perched on the railing, feathers fluffed in what looked suspiciously like pride. I reset the mechanism, deliberately twisting the latch to require 3 rotations of a small dial I'd salvaged from an old jewelry box. "Watch," I said, rotating it. 6, 2, 4. He watched. I locked it, walked back inside, made tea, left the camera running because curiosity is a reflex I've never unlearned. The next morning, it was open again. The latch turned cleanly to 624. Peanuts gone. The camera footage told the rest. Fletcher landed, studied the box, tilted his head the same way I had, then began tapping the dial with his beak. Click, 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 mimicking the rhythm I'd made. After the third full rotation, the latch popped. He cawed, triumphant, as 2 other crows hopped closer, peering inside like students at a lab demo. By afternoon, 3 more had learned. By nightfall, the clip Tessa posted had 6 million views. Researchers called it independent combination recall. Twitter called it witchcraft. Miles watched the video beside me, face pale with awe and worry. "Do you ever wonder," he said slowly, "if you're still the one in control?" I looked at the screen. Fletcher cocking his head, the box open before him like a solved mystery. and I couldn't tell if what I felt was fear or reverence. "They're not under control," I said softly. "They're participating." The next day, reporters parked outside our building. Children showed up with peanuts in paper bags. Someone started selling crow-themed coffee mugs from their trunk. The HOA, of all people, approved a petition to officially rename our block Corvid Lane. It started as a joke and stayed because nobody knew how to stop it. That evening, as the sun sank over the power lines, I sat on the railing beside Fletcher. He dropped a silver pull tab at my feet, then looked up as if asking what was next. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Maybe you tell me." Behind me, Miles stepped outside, coffee cup in hand. "So, genius birds and a viral documentary," he said. "You've basically built an empire." "I built enrichment," I said. "Empires collapse." He leaned against the doorframe. "Sloan thinks you should monetize. She texted. Says you could get sponsorships, press, a deal." I turned my head slowly. "You told Sloan about this?" "She follows the news. Everyone does. She also follows you, apparently." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. The silence between us thickened, filled with the distant cawing of 100 witnesses. That night, I lay awake listening to the flutter of wings on the roof, rhythmic and unbothered. Outside, the world had decided I was a phenomenon. Inside, I felt more like a bystander. When dawn came, Fletcher was gone, off somewhere leading lessons I hadn't authorized. A few streets over, school children would later report crows dropping coins into storm drains, mimicking the sound of the latch clicks. Learning. Teaching. The next time Tessa filmed, she called it the Crow Curriculum. And for the first time in months, I realized I'd created something that no one, not the Strouds, not the city, not even I, could truly claim to own. By the time the combination lock video hit 10 million views, the street where I'd once begged for a parking spot didn't look like a street anymore. It looked like a pilgrimage site. Vans with university logos lined the curb. Tripods sprouted like saplings. Strangers crouched with telephoto lenses waiting for Fletcher to perform. Someone even sold peanut-shaped cookies from a folding table that read, "Feed your inner crow." I watched from the balcony, equal parts proud and uneasy. The birds didn't seem to mind. They flew their routines like stage actors who'd discovered improv: lever, latch, applause, repeat. Every click of a camera felt like a tiny, invisible leash. Miles stepped out behind me, still in pajama pants, eyes half closed. "You created Disneyland," he murmured. "I created data," I said automatically, though the words didn't sound right in my mouth. The HOA had leaned into the spectacle. Corvid Lane now gleamed from a fresh green street sign. Mrs. Kowalski sold miniature garden gnomes holding peanuts. Kids biked by, shouting two-note whistles, their sneakers scattering shells across the pavement. The block was famous, thriving, and yet something in me stayed coiled, wary. Maybe peace just felt unfamiliar. That evening, I opened my mailbox and froze. Inside sat a thick envelope with no return address. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. "I'm the man who hurt your crow." The video found me. I understand now what I did and why they followed me. I never apologized, to you or them. I'm sorry. Damon Pike. A cashier's check for $5,000 was clipped to the letter, made out to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. I stood there for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. When I showed it to my cousin, he whistled low. "You realize what this is, right? Restorative justice. From a species that doesn't even prosecute." "Maybe forgiveness," I said, though it felt too early to use that word. 2 weeks later, just before my shift, a black sedan eased into the hospital drop-off zone. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, posture straight enough to shame a ruler. Her coat was expensive, her grief even more so. "I'm Patricia Stroud," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Cole's mother." The name made something twist in my gut. "He's not exactly my favorite subject," I replied carefully. "I know. He's facing charges in Nevada. Harassment, property damage, same pattern." She paused, studying me as if weighing whether truth would help. "He asked me to come. He wants to make amends, to volunteer, learn from you, if you'll let him." I stared. "He wants to volunteer with birds that still remember his license plate?" Patricia opened a leather folder and slid a check toward me. $50,000 this time, payable to the rehab center. "It's not hush money, it's acknowledgement. You changed something in him. maybe shame, maybe wonder. Either way, he's asking for work, not pity. Then he starts at the bottom, I said after a long breath. Cleaning bays, seed trays, whatever needs doing. Patricia smiled faintly, relief softening her edges. He'll do it. He needs humility more than comfort. 6 months later, Cole Stroud clocked in at 7 o'clock a.m. Sharp, wearing thrift store jeans and a volunteer badge that looked oddly fragile on his chest. He didn't speak to me at first. He scrubbed bowls, changed water, swept seed husks with a focus that seemed almost penitent. The crows noticed long before I did. They watched him from the fence, silent, assessing, as though taking attendance. One afternoon, as sunlight cut across the enclosures, Fletcher landed on the fence near where Cole was working. The man froze, rag dripping suds. Fletcher hopped closer, dropped a red bottle cap at his feet, and waited. Cole blinked, confused. Fletcher picked it up again, carried it to the feeding tray, and set it beside the seed like an offering. Give, then receive. Cole hesitated, then bent down, found another cap in the supply bin, and placed it on the tray. Fletcher croaked once, approval unmistakable, and took the seed. The exchange was done. That night, Cole knocked softly on my office door. They forgave me, he said. Or decided you're useful, I answered. He smiled, small but genuine. Same thing. The next morning, he came early, built rough puzzle toys from scrap wood and bits of mirror. The crows adored them. Within a week, they began bringing him trinkets in return. Foil wrappers, coins, buttons. A barter economy of redemption bloomed quietly in the back corner of the rehab yard. Tessa returned with her cameras, now backed by a streaming grant. The working title on her clipboard read, The Crow Wars. She filmed Cole feeding Fletcher, filmed me logging data, filmed neighbors laughing under strings of reflective tape that no longer meant threat but decoration. When the documentary premiered downtown, the theater lights caught every glossy surface, projector, eyes, maybe even tears. People applauded when Fletcher, on screen, solved the combination lock again. Slower this time, almost theatrical. They gasped when Cole's confession rolled across the captions. I thought control was power. Turns out it's just noise. Afterward, Miles found me near the exit, his hand warm at my back. You did it, he said quietly. We did it, I corrected. His phone buzzed. I saw the name flash before he turned it face down. Sloan Vega. The text preview read, Congrats on the premiere. When you're ready for media training, call me. I raised an eyebrow. If you answer that, we're over. He deleted it without a word. The silence between us wasn't brittle anymore. It was peace that had learned patience. Weeks blurred. The project grew legs, university partnerships, grants, volunteers. Cole stayed on, steady and humble, a man remade by repetition. Every evening before closing, Fletcher would land near his station, dropping a cap or a coin as if marking attendance. One dusk, while the sky folded itself into violet, Cole wiped his hands on a towel and said, You know, my brother used to say intelligence means control. I think he had it backward. How so? I asked. Intelligence is cooperation. The crows get it. I'm still learning. He smiled then, awkward, genuine, and walked toward the gate. Fletcher followed him a few steps, wings low, like approval with feathers. Above them, the flock turned in the dying light, a pattern so precise it looked like handwriting, spelling something none of us were fluent enough to read. I thought about Galen, about all the noise he'd made just to feel present, and wondered what he'd think of this. His war dissolved into an ecosystem of understanding. Maybe the universe had a sense of irony after all. That night, I stood on my balcony and whistled the old two-note call. Fletcher answered from the elm, softer now, almost tender. For the first time in months, I felt completely still. The wars were truly ending, but the lesson had only just begun. By spring, the crows began doing something new, something no one had ever trained or even imagined. During a routine morning demonstration at the rehab pavilion, Fletcher ignored the feeder puzzle we'd prepared. Instead, he flew down to the supply table, gathered a few objects, bottle caps, wire pieces, and a short twig, and started to arrange them. Cole froze mid-stride, watching. Avery, he called, voice lowered like we were in a chapel. I turned just as Fletcher hooked the wire through a hole in the bottle cap, tied it with the twig, and placed a peanut inside the small cavity he'd made. Then, to everyone's disbelief, he stepped back, called twice, and waited. Another crow, one of the younger ones, hopped forward, inspected the object, and used its beak to lift the twig latch. The cap opened. The peanut rolled free. The student crow ate. The pavilion went silent. Even the children on the field trip stopped whispering. Fletcher had built a puzzle for another crow. I exhaled slowly. He's teaching, I whispered. Tessa's camera trembled in her hands as she caught the moment. He's actually teaching, she said again, half to herself, half to the lens. Over the next week, it wasn't just Fletcher. 3 others began creating their own puzzle toys, each different but purposeful. One designed a lever made from sticks balanced over a rock. Another arranged stones into what looked like a primitive maze. The researchers called it emergent pedagogy. I called it proof that intelligence, once liberated, multiplies. Dr. Ria Chandra from UW nearly cried watching the playback. They're demonstrating instructional behavior. This is culture, in real time. Cole just muttered, "They're smarter than us," and went back to cleaning seed trays. The follow-up documentary, The Crow Teachers: Evolution of Urban Intelligence, premiered 6 months later. It didn't just go viral, it stayed viral. Awards, interviews, university panels, every headline used words like unprecedented, paradigm shift, Seattle miracle. Tessa accepted the Emmy on stage and, to my horror and secret pride, thanked Avery Kincaid, the nurse who listened, when the city stopped listening to itself. The crowd rose to their feet. I stood at the back of the hall, clapping with trembling hands, feeling both seen and dwarfed. After the ceremony, Cole found me by the exit, tie crooked, eyes nervous. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For letting me learn from them, from you. For letting me clean up what I broke." Before I could answer, a flutter cut through the noise. Fletcher, perched on Tessa's arm, feathers slick under stage lights. He flew over and dropped a small wooden puzzle box into Cole's palm. Inside, a single peanut waited. Cole turned it over, smiled faintly. "A test? Or a graduation gift?" I said. He unlocked the box, the peanut rolled free, and Fletcher cawed once, sharp, approving, before returning to his perch. The audience didn't see it, but I did. Cole blinked hard, swallowed once, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to me, to the crow. The next few years softened everything. Our project, now officially the Corvid collaboration, became a model for what the city called community ecology. Every week, schools visited the pavilion to learn how respect works when you stop assuming you're the only species that matters. Kids brought shiny trinkets to trade for feathers. Neighbors planted fruit trees instead of spraying repellents. The AHOA rewrote its charter. The new motto, "Respect earns cooperation." Cole drafted it himself. Miles and I bought a small townhouse 3 blocks away from the old battlefield of curbs and engine oil. When he proposed, he did it quietly, on the hospital roof at sunrise, the air still carrying that mix of coffee and disinfectant that had always been ours. "If you can make peace with crows," he said, smiling, "you can probably survive marriage with me." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the ring. We held a small backyard ceremony that summer. Cole stood with the rehab volunteers. Tessa filmed, promising to cut the footage into something poetic, but not cringe. Fletcher arrived late, black against the gold light, a silver bottle cap glinting in his beak. He dropped it onto the table beside the rings and cawed once, like a blessing. I decided to keep it forever. When the vows were done, the crows on the nearby power lines burst into synchronized flight, a dark ribbon twisting through the pink evening sky. It felt less like spectacle and more like applause. 5 years later, the neighborhood barely resembled the battleground it had been. The power lines were lined with feeders instead of threats. Children in rain boots carried little notebooks labeled Crow Language Log. Cole, now teaching part-time at a community college, lectured about empathy and urban wildlife. Miles designed a website for the project that let anyone track the flock's puzzles in real time. Sometimes, when my shifts ran late, I'd park under the same old elm, the one that had once been my watchtower, and sit for a while. Fletcher, older now, would land beside me. His feathers shimmered with faint oil-slick colors. His eyes, that impossible dark intelligence, reflected the streetlights. He'd drop something small in my lap, a coin, a button, sometimes just a fragment of glass, and wait. I'd smile, hand him a peanut, and whisper, "We did all right, didn't we?" He'd tilt his head, make that soft throat sound that wasn't quite a caw, wasn't quite a laugh. Then he'd fly off toward the horizon, where the sky met the sound of the city learning to breathe. The wars were over. The peace was learning how to listen. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story too.